Hi, this is Ashley Feraude, and you're listening to another episode of People's Stories. The stories about the people behind the professions. In this episode, I'm joined in conversation by Holly Komorowski. Now, if you're into real estate in any format whatsoever, this story is for you. We're going to find out exactly how Holly Komorowski created the real estate agency Home by Holly. And in the process, we're going to find out what drives somebody to set up their own business, especially in such a competitive field as real estate. This podcast has been made possible thanks to Mercedes-Benz in Canberra. So I hope you enjoy this episode of People's Stories with Holly Komorowski. Hi there, Holly. How are you?
Very well, thank you, actually.
Now, I should probably say your surname. It's Komorowski.
Yes.
Did I pronounce that really well?
You did really well.
I can cheat a little bit. I have a Polish background, so
yes.
No. Is yours Polish or is
Yes.
it something else?
Yes,
Oh,
it
there
is.
you go.
It is, but very Australianised.
Yeah. So presumably you were born here, but your parents were Polish?
Yes, that's right. And
okay.
my grandfather.
Alrighty, well, thank you very much for joining me. It's a real pleasure to spend some time with you. Could I go kind of maybe right to the beginning? Maybe not as far as your grandparents from Poland, but yourself. I mean, did you grow up in Canberra? Did you? Yeah, and you went to school, and did you do uni, or did you go straight into other things? How did that all happen?
I did grow up in Canberra, and so did my parents, and also. That was, it is interesting that my grandparents did come to Canberra after the war. My grandfather worked at the Yarralumla nursery, and so they grew up in Yarralumla, and my mum grew up in Griffith. So, and my nana had the first Savage's self-service, shop at the Griffith shops. So we do have, quite a history in Canberra, and so I'm very proud about that, and I think that's played a part in where I am today and who I am today. But I grew up in Western Creek. I was in Western and went to Western Primary and St. Jude's and then off to St. Clair's College. And then I went to the Catholic University. So I do look back at my very safe and very...
true Canberran.
schooling and childhood in Canberra. And then from university, went into teaching and did primary school teaching. And look back at that as well, just going, I was such a baby, I only had to do 3 years at the time at university. And here you were in the big wide world looking after 30-something children, at all of 20 years of age. But that was teaching, and then, onwards from there.
When you went to uni, did you know that you wanted to be a teacher at that point? Was there something that you fell into? How did that thing happen?
Oh, I think that was just the choice I made, the career path that made sense for me at school, and went straight from school to university. And at the time, Australian Catholic University was an extension really of college. It felt like it. It was still very, very small, and they offered teaching there. So that was where I did my Bachelor of Education.
And then how long were you a teacher for?
8 years. So I was teaching for 8 years, and then I had my first baby and stayed at home from there. And so that was, and I'm just out in Tuggeranong, so it was baby booming time in Tuggeranong. And so it was a really big school and over-enrolled and lots of kids. And so that was a really good experience. And then stayed home with the first baby and went on to subsequently have 3 more. So stayed at home for quite some time.
And at that point, I mean, I guess you really liked what you did as far as teaching goes. Yeah, so it was definitely the right career path. So when did the change happen, and when did you start to think, actually, I could do something a little bit different career change-wise?
There was quite a period of time in between, I guess, nearly 10 years from when I had Ruben and then had Charlie, and then I had twins. So I did end up with 4 under 4 and felt, that staying at home and looking after children was what needed to happen.
Sure.
And enjoyed that. I actually really loved it and was very happy, being a stay-at-home mum and doing lots of homely things. I was very homely, very happy to do cooking and pottery in the garden and, be with the kids. So I feel actually very blessed that I had that time, because I know that's a challenge, for people to do that as well. So after the twins returned went to kindergarten, I was thinking about what I was going to do next and what to do moving forward, and I did do some relief teaching and looked to go back into teaching. But it just didn't feel quite right, and it didn't inspire me to really go into that back to school. And so I started to explore some other options. And I guess too, things that I was doing, even though I did stay home for a number of years, I was doing lots of little jobs and part-time work, even when I was staying home, just to make ends meet. And I certainly was doing cleaning, and I taught piano, and I ended up working in a coffee shop just for a few hours, and just doing little jobs like that just sort of, saw us through in that time. And the other thing that I guess changed for me was that I'd been separated and had a marriage separation, and that changed the direction for me in terms of where I was living. And I met somebody new as well, and I think that was very influential in seeing the world in a different way and having being brave enough to try something different.
Yeah, for sure. And I can imagine real estate is a known thing to allow people from various walks of life to give it a go, so to speak. So was real estate an answer because it gave you that freedom to do something different, or were you already interested in it and therefore kind of wanted to pursue it?
So there was a period of time after, I'd sold a family home, and this was after my marriage separation. And I actually spent some time living with my parents with 4 children. So, very grateful for the support that they gave me during what was a difficult time.
Of course.
But then it took me quite some time to find a new home. And I was in the market for at least 12 months trying to buy a property. And I had a certain amount that I could spend, and that was really fixed. It was very much a fixed budget. And it was at a time when the market just kept was growing again and was taking off. And so it was a very competitive market, and prices were going up. And I found myself wanting to buy in the inner north because that's where the children were at school, and wanted to stay in the area, and was determined to buy in that area. But of course my budget wasn't really going to allow it, but I persevered. But during that year, it took me a whole year to go to open homes, meet with agents, register my interest, turn up for an auction, straight away be outbid, and that process is quite taxing and certainly takes a commitment to be going and looking at open homes every weekend. But as frustrating as that process was, I loved it. I loved looking at houses and thinking about the value of property and having an opinion about that, and, I guess considering maybe what I could do with homes. And I was obviously buying entry level as well into the inner north suburbs. So, you had to have some inspiration when you're looking at properties and what they could be and what they could be in the future. So I look back now and I think that year of trying to buy a home was definitely instrumental in me entering real estate and the kind of person and agent that I have become, and having that experience being a buyer and just knowing how hard it is actually as a buyer, particularly when you're trying to secure what is going to be your family home, is one, it's very emotional. And it does require a fair bit of commitment sometimes because Canberra can be a competitive market. And, you really need to take care of people in working through that process. And just knowing that, I was that person once upon a time, and eventually I did secure a home, and it was through, a little bit of good fortune, I think, the right place at the right time, but also perseverance and being really well educated at that stage. So bought my home, and then maybe a year later, that was when the twins were going into kindergarten, and I was re-entering the workforce, and my partner Ben suggested to me, maybe real estate could be really good for you. You would be really great at it. And that started a journey, and that's here I am today.
It's so interesting to hear, because property per se is probably one of the most common kind of dinner party conversations. That's because at first, it sounds exciting to be buying your first place, or even your second and third if you're lucky enough. But what ends up happening is it is so much work, and it always becomes a chore. But by the time you get through it and you've realized you've learned a lot about not only the financial aspect of it, but also the psychological aspect of it, of understanding how auctions work and, the demand and how that's driven, you kind of end up with all this knowledge. And that is why people love having that conversation about homes.
It is. So and I think the commonality there too is that people have purchased a home and they're invested in it. So they're invested in its value economically, they're invested in its value emotionally as the home that it provides for their family or, where they live. And they're invested in their community because their home is also part of. So it is something close to all of us. And so it is easy, to become something that we all speak to and talk to. So yeah, that's where it all came from and that's how it all started. I think the real opportunity for me was not having a sense of expectation entering into a new career. I'd been at home for, it turned out to be 10 years. And even though I had done little jobs along the way that had generated a little bit of income, my income had been very modest. And so anything that I earned was really a bonus. And I didn't come in expecting, leaving a position in the public service of, 80 to 100,000 and come back to zero. I came in, really with just a very, no great expectation to earn a whole lot of money. I really just needed to earn a little bit to keep doing what I was doing, and anything above that was a bonus. So I was able to put the time in that you need to and the hard work before the results start to deliver and that you start to generate income. And there is a lag and there is time that is required. And having a supportive partner as well was essential because, Ben was able to work 2 jobs and pick up the slack and really he invested in me to be successful. And I think that's
what relationships
really
and partnerships are
Absolutely,
about, right?
Definitely.
No, that's amazing. Can I ask about your own agency, Homes by Holly? I think if I remember correctly, that auction that I was at, you were still with Richard?
Yeah, still with Luton.
And so there must have, of course, been a moment at which you thought, great, I can go on my own. Take me through that process, because there must have been some fear, but at the same time, you must have been able to back yourself in order to make that. So tell me about that balance.
I'm really proud about this and very excited when I do think about how and why, it led to the next steps of starting the agency. And it really was a matter of backing myself and being brave. And I was really excited by that at the time and still excited by that now, because I still think we're being very brave, building this business, in Canberra. But I'd been at Luton for, I guess it took 3 years where I could see that I had started to build momentum in my business. So that's sort of solid 3 years. That's what I mean about taking some time to really build up, the success of your own business. It is a business within a business. As a real estate agent, you very much so are driving, you can drive the success of your own business by the work that you do. So I had felt that sort of at that 3-year mark, I could see that I was moving, I'd built up a really successful reputation and started to establish myself. And it was in that third year that I saw that momentum. And then the 4th year, it was 2015, and I really saw a shift happen for me. And it was also due to a changing marketplace, which was the year of Mr. Fluffy blocks and people being displaced and having to buy and buy new homes. And certainly that propelled the market in 2015, and all that work I had done the previous 3 years, I think, certainly came to fruition in that year, given what was going on as well in the market. And so after moving into 2016, so now sort of 4 years in real estate, I'd been really successful. I'd been really successful within the company of Luton, and I'd reached, what I felt was so at the top of my game as well within that company. And I was starting to question, well, what is next for me? And where do I go from here? Do I just keep doing and performing at this level within Luton, or do I do something else? And that's what, certainly was one of the thought processes around starting an agency and starting my own business. But the other thing that had started to happen was the realization that I had built a reputation, and that reputation was being recognized for being really good at what I was doing, and that people wanted to work with me, and they were choosing to work with me. They weren't choosing to work with the agency. In a lot of the cases, they really were choosing to work with Holly.
And when you say people, do you mean private buyers and sellers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
so people are approaching
clients.
you directly on a personal level saying, Holly, this is what I'm after, or this is what I want to sell. Yeah, I see. So it's this direct kind of relationship that was working really well for you.
It was. And I think the reason I had been able to achieve that was by building a brand, and I'd built a brand around myself.
Yeah.
And so I'd really established that people knew who I was, and I'd built a brand around Holly Komorowski, and I'd done that through social media, and I'd done that just through being really good in my areas that I was working in, and that reputation was now, was propelling my business. And so that the combination of recognizing that and then understanding that I could take that brand and turn it into my own, and then being brave enough to do it is how it all started.
Can I ask, I've seen other agents do the same thing in the past where they've got up to a particular point and they said, now it's time for me to go on my own. Is there any ever slightly dirty feeling about the agency that you've been working for or people who've been working with? I've always wondered about that. Is it a given? And, do agencies kind of go, look, this person's done so much for us, it's about time they go on their own, and we congratulate them and go ahead. It's good competitive kind of stuff in the market. Or is it a bit of like, after all we did for you, now you go and set up an agency on your own? I always wondered about this.
I guess it depends on the business and on the particular leader of that business, how they respond. I would, my view, and I guess what I'm trying to implement is that I would hope to build everybody that works with me to a level where that they may do that. And if they did choose to do that, then that would be okay. I mean, it's about valuing the people you have with you when they're with you.
Yeah.
Of course, there's always going to be a sadness when people leave a business.
Well, you're losing that part of your business,
someone,
of course. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think recognizing that, I would have a sense of satisfaction that if I had helped somebody achieve great heights and then that does propel them to somewhere else, then, you have to be proud about that. But I guess in any business and any industry, it's very competitive. And so not everybody, I guess, does maybe view it that way. Maybe they would feel frustrated that they'd put a lot of time and energy into someone and they leave. I guess the other side to look at that is that by supporting the people that are working within your agency, and while they're doing really well with you, I mean, they're helping, they're making money for your business. So, economically, helping people achieve helps, build your own business. And if you have the right culture and hopefully, if you support people within that, then they won't leave.
Yeah.
I don't know. It is interesting, but I guess the best, I think about apprentices, and you're training an apprentice to be the best that they possibly can be so that your business is as successful as it can. And quite often then the time will come and they will move on.
Yeah.
But I think you just have to be philosophical about that. And I think how you conduct yourself when people do leave is really important, because things change quickly and quite often things, go full circle.
I guess the other thing too is when people enter the market and new agencies come up and all the rest of it, each time that happens, it changes the market just a little bit. Do you think the game of real estate and the way that it's perceived by people and the way that it provides a service to the community that it usually does, is that changing? I mean, has that changed a lot in the time that you've been in the game?
I think that there is a change and there is a shift, and most certainly it's recognised now that needs to happen, that personalisation and that professionalism around real estate is definitely required. Is it actually happening? I think there would still be a lot that would say it isn't, and that certainly can improve. But I think what happens is that when markets shift and change, when markets do become more challenging, such as right now, then the agents that are really good at what they do and have built, really positive relationships and have been in it for a long time and have looked after people along the way will, are doing the right thing. So their businesses will continue and work through the fluctuations of markets. It's interesting you talk about things that you do, and one of the things I've always really liked about myself is that I've always had my blinkers on, and I've been very good at just maybe it's a bit of naivety as well, but just going, that's a great idea and I'm going to go and do that because that makes sense to me. And I haven't always, I've most certainly been very careful to just, focus on my own game and not necessarily be looking at your competitors and, what you can and how you compare, and working out ways to just do the best service and the best I can for my clients. And in doing so, I think that was something else that led me to start the business, is that I had started to implement, those sorts of practices into my business when I was at Luton's. And that was wanting to, have photos taken a certain way, wanting to deliver the narrative of the home and make sure that the photography reflected that. And look, I was, doing really well within Luton's, and, Richard Luton was very supportive of allowing me quite a long lead in doing those sorts of things. But they were definitely the sorts of practices that I think also led me to being different and wanting to take that next step further and do that, within under my own brand. And so it's interesting that in a very short period of time, I can see that there has been a change in real estate, and there are things that that I did in introducing people into images, working, really closely with Swell Design Group and Anton, bringing some of those branding ideas for, commercial and development style marketing to a residential space, and branding property, and all of those sorts of aspects have become part of what we do and what I do here now at Home by Holly, and have also delivered that value proposition that I've always wanted to deliver, which is that tapping into the story of the home, tapping into the story of the people, making it really a sense of personification for property and personalisation and being creative. And so that's something that I feel that has lifted the standard of real estate in Canberra. I can see that lots of other agencies and agents are trying to implement that as well. And I think the photography has really lifted in the last few years. And I think there's quite a few people have started to appear in photography much more across the board, and or even just, even I guess pets. I mean, so
cats and dogs, and having those in photos always helps sell anything.
Well, it's an emotional connection, isn't it? So, so I think there has been an influence and a change as you talk to.
Yeah, I mean, it almost seems like to me that you've taken that very early experience that you had around the emotional journey of buying a home, and in fact, you still use it very strongly in the work that you do right now, because everything that you just spoke about, introducing people into photos, having a very particular color palette, and all the rest of the things that you've got going on, plus the personal relationships that you have with your clients. You're not talking about value in business and investment. You're not talking in the hardline aspect of it, even though that's exactly what's underpinned in all of this. You talk about the emotional side of things. So it would seem to me that very much that early experience that you've had and the amount of time that you've taken to kind of really understand that is something that you've really placed into your business. And the other part of it that kind of sticks out for me is from a design and marketing perspective, I remember spotting your branding. It wasn't about the super corporate hard sell component. That was an element of flair of design added into it. But it seems to me, it's interesting, you're almost saying that wasn't a conscious decision as a point of difference because you scanned the market and said, here's a gap. It came out of your own idea that was the right thing to do, that was in line with who you are, but then also what you thought was something that people would respond to well on a personal level. Which is very interesting because, very often when I've seen kind of designs being done for various companies and so on, one of the things you do is you scan everybody else and go, oh, they're doing it well, I'll just copy a bit of that. And, whilst here you went, what am I about? What do I want to represent? What do I think that my clients will like? And then you obviously pushed it in that direction. So maybe the blinkers approach is actually a very good one to have.
I think so. I think it's very, and I did learn that like really early on in the piece, I heard somebody at a conference say that, focus on your own game. And I just consistently would tell my, had that mantra in my head and just focus on delivering the best outcomes you can in your own capacity.
Yeah.
And that really was starting to do things differently and going, well, why can't we do that? That'd be great. Let's have this photo with Jean sitting in her kitchen. And it made sense at the time, and the story was authentic, and it delivered a message that I needed to deliver for a particular property. This was for 68 Ebden Street in Ainslie, and it actually was the first time that we had a person in a photo. And it happened, and it is a really good story because Jean was delightful and a delightful older lady, and, it was just so, wonderful to be around and happy to be moving with, selling her home and moving to be with her son, and was at that stage. And her home, she'd been there for over 50 years, and the home had been bricked in by her husband, who'd been a brickie, and all the character windows had been taken out, replaced by aluminium windows in the 80s, and all these things that happened to the house, it had a very lengthy lifetime of change, and was probably needed to be knocked down, but something I'm very, very, very careful about, because I think that isn't the right approach.
Yeah.
Talking about knocking down properties, I think sometimes that's obvious, but you don't need to focus on it. Anyway, so Jean was lovely, and this was her home full of treasures and her garden full of, 50 years of chooks and vegetables. But it was really difficult to take photos of this house because it was all a bit of a mess with stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
And so when we went to take the photos that day, and Jean was sitting at her table having a cup of tea, and I just said to Adam, our photographer, I'll go and have a cup of tea with Jean and have a chat with her, and you just see how you can do the best you can with certain rooms. And it was in that moment that I realised the story was really about Jean, and it was about her home in this suburb and what it meant to live in this suburb. And the home could become something new, or the home could be, redeveloped in the future. But it really was about what it meant to live in Ainslie. And so the photo of Jean happened, and we just took a photo of Jean. I said to Adam, take a photo of Jean, that'd be lovely. And it was just so gorgeous. And then I wrote a story about Jean and living there for 50 years, and read between the lines. You could sort of work out what the house was and what it required. And we led with Jean's photo, and it just had this massive amount of engagement. And it was really because just no one had ever done that before. And
also because it probably was very authentic. Totally. There's that joke obviously goes around that a real estate agent could sell anything in copy about something negative being a positive. I get where that comes from. It's a particular marketing spin to ensure that people are interested and can see the potential as opposed to what they're seeing at that point. But I guess what you've done there is you've told an authentic, real story, and exactly, people could read between the lines.
A lot of these things have happened not necessarily by design, but you've gone to the property, you've met with the people, and then suddenly you've realised what needs to happen. Yeah. And Jean got so much value out of that. The whole experience, that her home was valued, her life there was valued. She was so happy. And we actually captured the buyer that has kept the home, has replaced the windows, has taken the bricks off, and has restored it. And I find that just unbelievable, and just so joyful that the marketing outcome, and honestly, I'm sure for most, if we had have marketed it as a knockdown, that's what would have happened to it. Yeah. But there was a story there, and it was really the buyers tapped into it and they valued it, and the home has been kept. So that's really interesting. And another really interesting story only recently. So we have all these little reminders every now and again where you just go, actually, that's why that works. That works so well. We had a one officer crescent in Ainslie just a couple of months ago, and it's known for its wavy hedge. It's the iconic wavy hedge as you come around the roundabout from Ebden Street to Officer. So everyone knows this hedge. And something else that I've learned over the years is quite often when you've got something about a property that's unique, or even if it's the elephant in the room, not that the hedge was, but you put it front and centre and you talk about it. And by doing that, you create an interesting marketing campaign. You also then add value to whatever might be perceived as something not being the best feature of a home. And you very likely are going to tap in and capture a buyer that's going to value what you've put front and centre. And so the lovely lady that's bought Officer Crescent is a horticulturist and she loves the garden. She's going to keep the hedge, and so the whole message a little bit subtly just through that campaign was that we really needed a custodian of this hedge. So the next buyer needed to come in and look after it. But the reality is that may not have happened.
Yeah.
But it was still important to the owners and important, I think, an important part of the campaign that we did focus on that. So it's interesting how that's happened in that scenario again. And
so that's an interesting take on success. And actually, one of the questions that I ask quite often is how people define success and, what that means to them. And it's interesting listening to you talk about that because it seems like, the successes that you're talking about is not that I sold this listing for the record price in Evet. It's because I managed to connect the real need of a place with somebody that was a perfect fit for it. Would I be right that that's the kind of stuff that drives you, aside from obviously ensuring the business is successful and that there's money flowing through? But yeah, you're telling me about this. You're not telling me about the biggest listings, which is interesting.
It is interesting, and I think economic success is assured by all the things that we do. And so if you deliver on the very best marketing campaign, if you deliver on taking care of your clients, if you deliver on looking after the buyers, then I feel like the very best economic outcome will be achieved. So you don't need to focus on that. You need to focus on doing your job really well and looking after
that's the
people.
blinkers approach again. Don't worry about that part. Just set straight to what you want to achieve and the rest will follow.
Exactly.
It's true. I've got to tell you one thing about me, even though this is about you. Out of all the work that I do from like a freelancing perspective or the creative consultancy that I do, I've never once advertised. I've never once had a business card that I've given out to anyone. All of that came out of me focusing on particular individuals and working really hard with them. And then people would notice that and say, who did that for you? Or how did you get that project to happen? They say, oh, that's Ashley. And all of that came out of recommendation, which I always thought maybe put it down to me being lazy and not wanting more clients or something. But actually the truth of the matter is that I feel really good about people coming to me wanting to work with me for a specific reason or something they've already seen, as opposed to me approaching them on a sales kind of value.
Yeah.
And then maybe that in many ways is, now that you've kind of talked about the blinkers approach, it's about focusing on the thing you want to achieve, and then the other parts will kind of fold underneath that.
And I think if you're passionate about what you do and you are really good at what you do, so you love it, I mean, both they go hand in hand, then you're not necessarily trying to be someone else. You're being true and authentic to your own voice. And I think that's something else when you talked about before, the branding and how that came about. And I guess the colours made sense to me because they were very female and they're very soft and they were very much in line with what I am, a female, and very personal. And the branding and the name of the business was, and again, talking about the fact that I had built a brand and that brand was around my name. So it made sense that my name, and that was really different too, because there's lots of names in business like Luton and Blackshaws, and they're all surnames, and they're certainly to have a first name and a very feminine tone as well to the branding was completely different. But it was just, again, it wasn't trying to be different. It just made sense because that's who I am.
Yeah.
So it is interesting that I certainly didn't approach any of that with an intention to, I think, compete against the other businesses. It was actually just to be myself, and I guess that sense of competition around yourself, just being the best person that you can be and being the best business you can be. And I certainly didn't come into it either thinking that I was going to grow to the size that we are today in 3 years. So, and that was a question that was asked of me last year, what's going to happen next year? And all I could think of is we're just going to consolidate. We just need to take a deep breath and just stay true to where this all started. But it is interesting how that's evolved as well, because I haven't recruited anybody.
Sure.
I haven't been on an intentional path to grow or to recruit people or to be the biggest agency. It's all just happened by people wanting to work with me and the business growing and it is growing and it has been successful, and the brand has now more recognition and we're doing really well and we're doing great things, and so it is growing of its own momentum. But that's something of interest to me as well when you talk about not having a business card, certainly in terms of going and recruiting people. Has not happened either.
Hasn't happened, yeah.
No, so
what do you think is the biggest misconception that people have about your profession that actually isn't true?
I think what it really is a lot of hard work. I think that maybe there's a misconception, and look, maybe that's contributed to by the way some real estate agents promote themselves, or the way they dress, or the cars they drive, or this idea that, it's extremely lucrative and, so you can afford a really fancy car. And I think in any business and any industry, there is potential to be really successful and certainly to earn, really, really well. But that requires a lot of hard work.
Yeah. And
to continue to work hard. And the real estate, as I said before, took me 3 years just to get to, a reasonable position. And in those days, like this is only 10 years ago, I probably earned 30-something thousand the first year, maybe 60. Actually, I think I went backwards in the second year. And then, maybe I'm pretty sure we landed maybe to a position of maybe 60 or 70,000 in the third year. And so it certainly wasn't, that you're walking in and suddenly, you're earning 100,000 plus, or, so it took many years to get to a position where, one, you had some consistency around income, and you have to continue to work hard. You can't take your foot off the pedal and then suddenly go, oh, I've made it here. So I think that's the misconception. It's extremely, it is a very demanding profession, because if you really want to do well in it, then you need to work really, really hard, and you've got to be available a lot of the time, and it's not necessarily conventional hours, and you've got to just keep going, and you've got to learn to have a pretty thick skin as well, and have a lot of, confidence around putting yourself out there and taking some rejection along the way, because again, being competitive marketplace, that's what happens. And that took me a little bit of time to just learn, because coming from a nurturing and caring background of teaching and then being at home as a mum, to then be flipped into you've got to go out and put yourself out there and compete for business. That's a skill that needs to be, you need to learn as well. So that was something new for me. But look, I was I think deep down, I'm a competitive person. So I thrive in that, and I thrive in wanting to do well and wanting to succeed, and that self-competition. And that's why I think starting the business was about, well, how can I be better? Where do I go from here? And always wanting to improve. And when I did start the business, I honestly thought I would be going back to square one. It was going to be building from the absolute beginning. You'd be putting yourself out there, telling people you've got this new business and giving them confidence to list with you and competing again. But what actually happened was the opposite. And I, looking back now, can see why that was. And that was because of that brand I'd built for myself. So it was really easy when I did move into Home by Holly. Suddenly they just went, oh, we know Holly, and now we know Holly in this, in this
so
business.
It fit really easily.
So I didn't actually, it didn't go back to square one I thought it was going to, and so it went really well quite early in the piece. And so it's really, there's lots of interesting things about that I've now taken on in terms of how I help the other agents within the business be successful, and the things that are important to us, and, building those personal brands, and that the agent is the brand, and really focusing on the people. And that's sort of come from, I guess, those learnings along the way.
I've kind of noticed that your work is also in other areas apart from real estate that has to do with design specifically. And so I was interested in that too, because is that a business decision, or is that a personal decision because you're interested in design and art and all the rest of it, or because that's a good fit with the work? Where does that sit for you?
I think all three.
Okay.
Yeah, I think everything you just said there makes sense. The starting point in getting involved with Design Canberra was through Rachel Coughlin. And I sold a property for Rachel in 2015, and the experience of meeting someone like Rachel, she's a really inspiring and amazing woman. and I learn a lot from her. And that experience of working with her very collaboratively, I think selling her house was very valuable to me in the direction I took with my business. And so when Rachel became CEO of Craft ACT and approached me to be involved, I guess straight away I wanted to be involved, because to be able to work with Rachel, was wonderful to have that opportunity and continue to learn from her all the time.
Yeah.
And also to the alignment with design and homes and architecture makes complete sense. And it's something that we love and we celebrate, in selling homes and in our ways when we, create marketing campaigns. So that made complete sense. And then also being able to support something within the community, that we all live in, and
so it's personal and professional.
It's personal, it's professional, and it just makes us feel really, really good, and we feel like we're giving back and supporting makers and designers, within Canberra as well. And so we have, since taking on not only the working with Design Canberra Festival, but we've also taken some opportunities to work with some local makers. And so we've had a gift that we give at settlement with Rashield Girl Nomad, and she's made us an exclusive gift, and we packaged that up through Craft ACT, and
it goes back to supporting Canberra, which
absolutely
you're so much part of, right, from the very beginning.
And so exactly, and
so it's a real mixture.
Trying to support local by by also having those things in my home. So, I think my home is really quite funny at times, because it's such a mishmash of different things, and, a new partner and a blended family, and, all these pieces that have come together from
Sounds
two
fun.
houses. I think it's beautiful, but it is, sometimes I think, oh gosh, it's a mishmash of things. But then interwoven into that are now all these special pieces where I've, deliberately and tried to support local makers and designers. And so I've got the most beautiful Vink light over my kitchen bench, and I adore it. It's like just one of my favorite things. And so even though I think I have this really eclectic mix of things, but I'm really proud of it, because I like that I know where it comes from, and I really like that it's supported our local community. It's supported our local design, and it's in my house, and I look at it all the time, and I appreciate it. And then I also try and communicate that through stories that we tell. And so I think that's about living in a community and bringing value to the communities and to the city that we live in. And we don't need to look very far to find some really inspirational and amazing and creative people in our city. And so that's something I'm maybe, just as you get older in life too, you really appreciate what you have. And so that's
I couldn't agree more. In fact, I think we're very lucky here in Canberra that, because it's a relatively small community in terms of being, the city that it is, the biggest advantage of that is that it's actually quite easy to find people who are very talented. And there's no shortage of interesting stories and inspirational people here, that's for sure. But you can actually make contact with them relatively quickly. This example right here, because you seem like a person that's very optimistic. But is there anything that worries you the most or keeps you up at night? Is there one part of concern around the things that you're doing that you might think, that's the bit that I need to work through?
I am very optimistic. And maybe that blinkers thing isn't always a good thing. I mean, we will all be okay. It's, the only challenge is, and probably the only thing that keeps me up, is helping people work through difficulty.
Sure.
And so another focus, I guess, is helping people work through disappointment. And so I guess if you could imagine if clients and people that are selling their houses and vendors have an expectation of a certain outcome, and I guess that's what would always keep me up at night, or where would I lose sleep, is that maybe that isn't going to be delivered, and that disappointment, and helping people work through that. And that is of no fault necessarily of anyone's. It's just like right now, circumstances have changed. And so this is the best outcome we can deliver in the current circumstances, and that may not be what people were hoping to achieve at the outset. So managing that and, supporting people, clients, and just giving time and communication, and being having as much empathy and care as you possibly can. There's only so much you can control, and that's something I would say is a challenge, just because it worries you. You don't want to disappoint anyone, and you certainly want to deliver the best you can. But I think that ultimately it is that relationship. As long as you really focus on doing everything you possibly can and looking after people, then you just have to know that that's the best that you could do in the circumstances.
I've got two very quick final questions and we'll finish up. I always wondered, it seems like that everything that you've done is not been calculated as a plan, but you're definitely very happy with the outcome of everything that's taken place. Is there anything that you would have liked to have tried if you had your time over again? In other words, either a profession or a skill or anything like that?
Not really. I think it's really, I guess the one thing I reflect on my life is that I was very safe in my earlier stage of my life, which was, and maybe that was just growing up in Canberra, and I didn't really travel and I didn't have these life experiences. I, chose a different pathway and got married young and had children. And that was all wonderful too, because every all the dots join and lead you to the place you are now and different experiences. But I guess looking back, I can see that I certainly made lots of safe decisions. I felt were safe decisions, choices as a younger person. And so I've certainly now much more aware of that and willing to be brave and take risks and think about, what you can do. And so I think, and I think you can be different. And that is the biggest thing of all, which is to just keep challenging the way things can be done. Yeah. Because there's always another way that you can do them, another way to look through the lens. And that's something I'm always thinking about.
One last one. Who do you look up to? Now, that can be professionally or personally, but where do you kind of get your sense of inspiration from?
That is hard. I think that there are quite a number of people that inspire me and people that I've met over the years that I still connect with and think have played a part in inspiring me along the way. And I mean, right now, even just listening to podcasts, I think that focusing on leadership and entrepreneurial podcasts have definitely what I like to listen to, and that sort of inspires me from a business perspective. But I think really truthfully over the years, it's some of the people that I've done business with and houses that I've sold that have been pivotal in changing my direction or going, wow, that was just amazing the way that we collaborated in that styling or we used. And, two ideas or two particular properties that come to mind is definitely my meeting of Rachel Coughlin and our approach to selling her home and working together on that. And that changed the way I move forward with other properties. And also to a Home by Holly property right at the start was with Judy Waters and, an amazing woman and very inspirational in doing things differently and inspiring me to back myself. And that was a very successful campaign and we won a national award for marketing. And so I definitely can see that there are particular inspirational people that I've met, even through business, that have changed my direction or influenced my direction, I should say. And I think over the long term and the big picture, there are some long-time friends that are very successful business people in their own right in Canberra that have been mentors to me and have been part of my journey right from the start, particularly as a real estate agent. And that would be Anton Scott Cameron at Swell Design Group, who still works creatively with me all the time, daily with our agency, and Greg Sly, another really significant Canberra businessman who's always somebody that I can turn to, and I'm also very much inspired by Scott Hannon, who's Ben's brother, that has moved over to America, to Silicon Valley, and has worked in the entrepreneurial space and Facebook and Pinterest, and that mentorship has certainly influenced me over the years, and I feel really fortunate to have those friends and in my life, friends and connections and community.
And when we went recording, you also mentioned the kind of inspiration that you got from the local community through even some things you've done in the past, like the CrossFit. Just mention that very quickly.
I know, the CrossFit connection. Oh, look, that actually is, I think, the biggest, is certainly in the last 10 years, something I hold very dear, and I know that will be friendships that will take me through for the rest of my life. But I guess the background of this story is a new gym had opened up in Belconnen, and, you know, we had 6 young children at the time, and so we thought that was a great idea that we should support these guys that had opened up the gym and take our 6 kids to do judo. And what was happening at the same time of the children doing judo, there was CrossFit happening and boxing and a whole lot of other activities. And lots of the mothers that had taken their children to do the judo started to join in and do the CrossFit sessions. And so I became, I'd never been to the gym ever before. I'd always been sporty and thought I was extremely, you know, fit and strong. But until you start doing CrossFit, it's a whole nother level. But I loved it. But what I really loved about it was I connected with all these other women that, you know, were turned up every week to do the CrossFit, and we became friends. You know, we trained together and we supported each other, and, you know, that's been a friendship now. And women from all different, you know, different professions and different places, and these women, you know, have just inspired me and have supported me over the years, and, you know, have always, you know, cheered me on as I've gone from starting in real estate to starting the business, and I guess are my advocates and my community. So I always think about that as being very pivotal and important in, where the inspiration that's led me to here today.
And it's lovely because it seems that all of that inspiration comes from the community around you.
Yes.
People at different levels and at different walks of life, right from something like CrossFit, right through to people who obviously work in Silicon Valley, which is obviously connected to your family. But it's lovely to know that inspiration is coming from people you can actually directly reach. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a chat with me. I've always wanted to have an insight into your life and everything else beyond the marketing interest that I have in everything that you've done. And I'm sure there'll be lots of people tuning in to kind of get to know you better. And now when they see you at different homes and everything else, they'll probably have a longer chat with you. So get ready for that.
Yeah, happy to. No problems at all.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
That's okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So there you have it. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast with Holly Komorowski. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all those who have reached out to me with questions and comments. I really appreciate that. And if you like the conversations, well, there are many more to come. So please subscribe, share, and comment. I'd love to hear from you at any time. You can find me on Instagram @PeopleStoriesPodcast. Thank you, and